Hey there, it's Craig at Unleashed Education here, and welcome to this week's editing toolbox video. In these videos, Charlotte and I take turns to share some quick tips, tricks and techniques that we hope will help improve your pet photography editing skills. This week, I'm showing you a little trick for this weird fringing that happens on images sometimes. So you get these weird edges around things. I've had a couple of questions about this recently in the membership group on Facebook, so I thought I would address it here today. So this is not to be confused with chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is generally something that is caused by the lens that is usually a blue or magenta or even green kind of thin line of fringing around the edges of things. This is a different type of fringing. So if I go back to the raw file for this image, I'll show you what actually causes it. It's quite simple really. So I shot this image quite dark with the intention of not blowing out the highlights and the sky. So in my edit I need to bring back the exposure and lift up those shadows. And in the process of bringing back the sky, this weird fringing appears. So it usually happens when you are lifting up the shadows and darkening down the highlights in quite large amounts. You can see I've gone almost all the way here, and I probably could go all the way in this one to 100, and I brought it back down 100 as well. So that is where this edge fringing comes from. And so if we jump over to Photoshop, I'll show you a couple of little ways that you can deal with it. Okay, so here I am in Photoshop. Now, there isn't really a super quick fix to this, but there are a couple of different ways that you can treat it. So I'll show you a couple of things first of all. If you go up to the top menu and go select, we can go select sky here. Now, it usually does a pretty reasonable job of selecting that. We've got a little bit of extra here and a little bit more here. Now, as long as you've got one of the selection tools picked in your tools here on the left, you can right click and you can go to feather, and that's going to feather this selection. So you can do it any kind of range from 5 to 50 pixels would work, and that will just refine the selection a little bit. It hasn't worked on this in this case, so what we can then do is either work with the selection as it is here, or what I would generally do if it doesn't work precisely with feathering is I will just deselect it, which is Command and D, make a new layer. Whether you have an accurate selection made or not, we're going to try one of two different ways to actually fix this. The first way is just by using the clone stamp and making sure that your opacity is around about 50%. I usually use for something like this. We're just basically going to slowly go around these edges using the color or using the area of the image that is quite close to the fringing that you already have. Sometimes there's just no substitute for doing these things manually. It just is the way that you have to do it to get the best results. Now, what you might need to do when you have done this and you've gone all around the edges and fixed it up is just make a mask. So clicking on the mask button here, and with a black brush, because we're on a white mask, you just might need to paint away if you've gone over these edges too much with your corrections. So just masking that out will finish everything off that you need. I'll leave this technique there. So the first way is done. That is cloning to methodically go around the edges and eliminate all of the fringing. Now we'll take a look at the second technique. Okay, and the other thing that we can try is by making a new layer, grabbing the brush tool. Let's take the color picker, pick a color that is close to the edge of the fringing there. Make the brush about the same size. I've got my opacity at 100% here. So then we can just carry on over these edges. And then what you can do then is just change the blending mode of this layer to luminosity. And if you need to, you can adjust the opacity of that layer to a point where it kind of just blends in. So that's the best way to deal with it. I think when you're shooting natural light outdoors in locations like this, you know, it's inevitable that you're going to get this happening. It does take a little bit of time to fix it. Sometimes it's definitely worth it, like in this case where it's really large fringing and it's very, very obvious. So it does pay to take the time to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just finish it all up myself, and then I'll show you the finished result. Hopefully that's helpful for you this week, and I'll see you again in my next video very soon.